Hey everyone, we are live. We're getting ready for Mecca's Only episode 426. This is going to be the second in our migration episodes, and yeah, Eric is going to join us in just a moment here. So I thought I'd go ahead and do our quick camera test like we always do at the beginning, um, just to make sure everything is working like it's supposed to be. Let's see. All right, so we got me. That's cool. We've got Eric and I. We've got Eric only, which is great. That's all we need. That's all we need. We're good to go. Oh, I did want to test something. So we're in full on beta mode now. This is a little spike in bandwidth there. We're in full on beta mode. This is Ecamm Live 4.2 beta, or yeah, beta 7. I think it's the 7th. I'm going to try something, see if this works. It didn't work before because I didn't realize it was only in version 4.2, but let me see if this does anything. Nada. We're supposed to be able to use the new reactions from macOS in Ecamm Live, and either they're not working or I'm not understanding how they're supposed to work. And it's probably the latter. All right, so that is not working. Yeah, so we're just waiting for Eric to join us. Again, it's the second in our migration episodes. This one is going to be on data migration. I'll explain this a little bit more in the show, but I had a client reach out to me who was still to this day using her Drobo, and the Drobo was currently working fine, but she was concerned with the state of Drobo as it is, that should something happen to it, she could potentially lose her data. And in her case, the data was client data. Really, she's a photographer. So losing all those years worth of data is not something that she could do. So anyway, we went over a few different options, and the exact option she chose really doesn't matter for the purposes of this conversation, but it got me thinking that this would be another great episode in our migration series. So that's what we're going to be covering today. Let's see. I hope everyone caught the Vision Pro conversation last week. As we said at the beginning of it, it wasn't supposed to be an in-depth review or anything, just Barry's experiences with the Vision Pro, his first week of ownership. And I think at the time we recorded it, he had only had the Vision Pro in his possession for, well, about a week, right? So it was kind of fun to have Barry on again. He hasn't been on in quite some time, and it was good to see him. And I'm eager to find out how much further he pushes that Vision Pro in the weeks to come. And of course, if you missed it, the other announcement, and I'll mention this in the episode again too, is Macstock. Macstock dates are confirmed. It's July 12th, 13th, and 14th. A little bit more information coming out about that third day. Yes, we had some eagle-eyed Macstock attendees get the newsletter and say, hey, it's 3 days this year. And I said, yeah, we got some ideas for that third day. So without revealing too much at the moment, because we're still kind of thinking, hey, there's Eric. All right, let me see. Let me get him in here. Can you hear me okay, Eric?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Wow, look at Eric in his new studio.
Which is still a mess yet and not even close to being done. So, yeah.
Awesome. And
But
I
getting there.
understand you've got a new desk. You've got a new, well, it's not a new microphone, but a new microphone arm.
Arm, yep.
Yeah.
And a new new desk. I got the I have a chair by the same brand, Secret Lab, which is kind of a interesting name. But anyway, they make gaming chairs and desks now. And I've just really liked their stuff. I love their chair, and so I saw their desk, and the last desk I had probably just, oh my gosh, 20 some years, and it was an oak desk, but it had seen its better days. And Tracy was like, "Yeah, there's no way that's coming out with us." So, and it didn't. So it didn't make it in the pod. So
Well, we'll get to recording here in just a moment because I know you have got a ton of stuff that you've got going on your end.
yeah,
I certainly don't want to take you away from all that hard labor for longer than necessary.
right, right.
And we do have a couple people watching. Hey, everyone. Um, I was just sharing a little insider information on MacStock. Now, you weren't with us last week, Eric. Did you see that we had Barry on?
I did. I did.
Yeah,
I didn't hear the whole show, but I heard a good part of it though. Yeah, and the Vision Pro. I should have known that he would have
right.
gotten the yeah.
Yeah, well, as he explained, he's kind of the first to always hop on new technology,
Yeah.
and it doesn't surprise me that he had the Vision Pro.
No,
I'm a
not at all.
little surprised that he hasn't been walking all over San Francisco with it yet. But as he explained, that's just a matter of course. You
Right.
go out in the street in San Francisco, and there are people walking around with all manner of weird technology grafted onto their skulls.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I did read an interesting post this week. Gosh, I don't remember where it was. I didn't take note of it, but it was an interesting post about someone who was experimenting with the Vision Pro and went out on the street, tried to figure out the safest and easiest way to take it out on the street and walk around with it, and decided that what was it? It probably was a Starbucks or something. The shop on the corner, which was, I think he said, roughly 600 feet from his house, was the safest way to experiment with walking around with it. And it was interesting because it said that it. Oh, and by the way, I should say it was in Chicago. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And so a little bit different than San
Yeah.
Francisco, a little bit different in
Yeah.
demeanor, a little bit different in
Yeah.
attitude.
Yep.
But he said that pretty much nobody paid any attention to him, like not a whit of attention. And to me, that seems very Chicago. Like, oh, okay, weirdo,
Right.
but it's not
Just
for me to say, right?
right. Look the other
And
way.
just keep walking or cross the street
Just
and like get away from them. But no,
right.
nobody said anything, including it must have been a Starbucks because I think it was his barista or something, including the barista who just served him his order, and that was it. Like, so I don't
Yeah.
know if it's
That's
just been
interesting.
so prevalent in the news, like, so
Right.
many people reading these articles. Now, I feel like I've read a lot of articles, but I follow tech news.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I do too.
is the
Yeah.
general population seeing these articles too? Or,
Yeah. I mean, you know what? I have no doubt that it's made the rounds on the morning shows and the news and stuff like that. And I don't really watch a lot of those either, but I can imagine like the Today Show. I mean,
like Al
it's
Roker
Apple.
walking around with Vision Pro or something?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I haven't talked to anybody, that watches that, but I don't know that it is really interesting. Cause like you said, I follow the tech news, and I seen some YouTube reviews and stuff like that. And of course, I listened to last week's show, but I outside of that, I can't imagine. In fact, normally I mean, it even caught me off guard when they went on pre-order. I
Mm-hmm.
I knew they
Me
were
too.
coming up, and it was going to be they were going to be released in February and everything. But and I and of course I didn't really have any plans to order one. So,
He
but
says as he pulls it out from the back, and
but here it is anyway.
but here it is.
No,
No, no, no.
yeah. But I mean, yeah. So it is kind of interesting. I can't believe there would have been somebody else already wearing one. Of course, the metaverse or the Quest, what is it, or the Oculus. I mean, those have been around for a while, but I don't see people wearing those either. So I don't know.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of these days we're going to get to the point where it's a little bit closer to a pair of glasses.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
it'll have that kind of. We were just watched an episode from season 8 of Flash, and they were in 2049. When they film these episodes, I don't know if they thought 2049 was like so far in the future, but in terms of when the show aired, I think it was really only 20 something years in the future.
Yeah. Right.
And they were wearing what amounted to be an AR headset, but it looked more like, those kind of broad sunglasses with the,
Right. The
a little
wraparound.
little wraparound, and then like the
Yeah.
LED stuff flashing on the sides and stuff. And I thought that's really where we're headed toward. And I think
Yeah.
when we get to that point, and battery technology allows for us to walk around without a battery pack in our pocket or whatever, and it can just sit
Right.
in the stems of the glasses or whatever. I
Yep.
think that's really when we're going to see the mass adoption. And even then, I
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know how many people are going to be. Well, no, I'll correct that. I was going to say I don't know how many people are going to be walking around the street that way, but I guess to me, if we're so used to people walking around the street, staring at their phone, not
Yeah.
paying attention to
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yep.
How is
Yep.
it any different wearing a Vision Pro? I mean,
Right.
you assume when you see someone walking, staring at their phone, that they're not paying any attention to you.
Yeah.
And
Right.
despite the pass through of the eyes, and despite the fact that they can allow, the world around them to come through via the cameras, I'm still going to assume that someone wearing a Vision Pro has no interest in what I'm saying or has any interest
Yeah.
in interacting with me. I mean,
Right.
that's
No,
just going to be my assumption.
yeah. Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
they do
In
start
fact,
talking, it's going to be shocking, quite frankly.
right. Right. And you're not going to know it's to you. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
They get so immersed in their phones,
Yeah.
I can't imagine what the attitude will be immersed in Vision Pro.
Right. You wonder if it'll be even more, how do you say, separating. I mean, now you're looking through that and getting your reality through this headset.
Yeah.
At least with the phone you can look up and actually see, but there it's going to be, yeah. Yeah, I
E-
mean, you could blank
yeah.
everything out. Yeah.
Even walking around with the phone is an isolating experience. If you
It's
allow
it,
yourself to be immersed in whatever is
yep.
happening on that tiny little screen and
Yep.
not paying attention to the world around you,
And you're wearing your AirPods or whatever. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
let alone now wrapping your noggin in something that totally immerses you in that environment. I can totally see getting fixated on a floating screen in front of me and not paying attention to that skateboarder coming down the sidewalk at me or
Oh,
whatever.
for sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Nope.
goodness gracious. Okay, insider information for the couple folks watching, and for well, I guess anybody who tunes into this after the fact, right? This isn't really insider information if I'm putting it out there on YouTube. But
Right.
yeah, we're looking at 3 days for MaxDoc this year.
Oh,
And the third day, the opening day, the Friday, is kind of a bonus day. It's going to be an add-on day, if you will,
yeah.
where I'm. God, I hope he doesn't mind my saying this, but I've been talking to Mike Schmitz about putting on a workshop that day. And I've also reached out to a number of other presenters to ask if they would also be interested in putting on a workshop that day. Now, as I said, it would be an add-on experience. It's not part of the regular weekend pass, but it's also intended to be, uh, pardon, pardon the expression, since we were just talking about Vision Pro, but a more immersive experience. Our normal talks are 45 minutes from the stage at MaxTalk, and I'm hoping to do much smaller, more concentrated workshops for a subset of MaxTalk's attendees that you can get a little bit more one-on-one with the person giving the presentation.
Oh, that would be terrific,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
So I
Oh,
guess
wow.
one-on-one, it's still one to many, but it's a much smaller group. So
Right.
depending on how many people might sign up for the workshop, it could, in theory, be 1 to 10. It could be 1 to 20, but I don't intend it to be 1 to 200. Like
Right.
a
It'll be
45-minute
one to
talk.
small group. Yeah.
One to small group.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the perfect way to put it. So that's what we're working on, and I can more confidently share that information because literally just yesterday we got to the point with the venue where I could confirm that we can have that third day. I wasn't sure
Oh,
until
okay.
just
Yeah.
literally, well, I guess it would have been 2 days ago now, when the contract was sent. That's when I was able to confirm that we could do that third day. And then yesterday, I had a longer phone conversation with the venue. Very, very, very nice person there helping us named Sarah. And I explained a little bit more in depth what I wanted to do with Friday. And she's like, oh, okay, great. She understood it better, what we were looking to do. She kind of rejiggered the contract and sent me the updated version just this morning, like about an hour ago. I got the updated version and I'll have that signed and sent back to them this afternoon. So we will be ready to go as soon as I get my act together and get everything set for folks to order their weekend passes for MaxTalk.
Wow.
So, yeah,
So is can I ask, is this a venue you've used in the past or a different one or
it is not a. So I have not signed the contract quite yet. I will put all the
yeah.
information out. But the neat thing about it, it's not a venue we've used in the past. The neat thing about it is everything is in one place.
Oh
So
wow.
in past years, people had to, stay at a
Right.
hotel in McHenry and then come to Woodstock or go to Crystal Lake or whatever. And there was all this driving around McHenry County, which, hey, great. You got to really learn what McHenry County was all about, I guess, I
Right.
suppose. But everything's going to be in one place. So, come in from the airport, get dropped off or park your car at the hotel, check in, get your room, and Max Stock's going to be held in the same location. It's got a full conference center and everything. So
Oh, that's nice.
yeah,
That'll be really
that's
nice.
that's really really
Yeah.
nice, and it's something I've been telling people for a few years now. I wanted to give them, and this is really the first year post pandemic that it's going to be easier to do and I could make a reality. So yeah,
Right.
that's where that's at. So
Which is great.
yeah, just a little insider information before we start recording the show. What else? What else? You didn't have
Awesome.
any news stories you wanted to cover today, did you?
No, no, I didn't. And yeah, no, I didn't have anything
Okay,
exciting at all.
all
So,
right. I did it. I made a few updates to this graphic here for our live stream.
you see that? I see the
I
little two with the eye. Yep.
Well, more specifically, I moved us up, right? And I moved us
Oh,
up
right.
because when we
Right.
have a comment come in, and I'll just put a little placeholder up here real quick. When we have a comment come in, now the comment is not sitting over our names or the logo or anything
Oh,
like
that's
that.
nice.
It's just,
Nice.
it fits better. So
Yeah.
that's good. And comments go away automatically. Boop. So
Excellent.
that's one change. But I think I'm ready to kind of update this background graphic too. This is one I I actually purchased this. It was a package of backgrounds for live streaming that I purchased, and it was cool. It's neat.
Yeah. Yeah, it
But
works. Definitely.
it works. But I was thinking, hey, maybe we should come up with a different background. So if you have any ideas, or anyone watching this has any ideas for what would be a cool background for this, let me know, and we'll switch it up. It's been a while now. It's been, what, almost 2 years we've been using this background. So I think, yeah, maybe we'll come
Yeah.
up with a new one.
Yeah. Has it been that long? You're right.
Yeah, August
Yeah.
2022.
It,
I can't remember when we started doing the live streams, but
anyway,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, change things up. Now, depending on the background, I may have to change all these other graphics, like our names and stuff. But that's cool.
Right.
That's not hard to
Right.
do.
No. No, no. I mean, yeah, the little gradient with the green.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So there's that. All right. Well, no news, right? No news. No news is
No
good
news.
news. Okay.
No news.
Cool. All right. Then we'll just go ahead and look at getting started, I think.
Yeah, that's going to be but we're
A
probably still
record.
40 minutes into it. No, 20 minutes. This is this has got to be a record for us.
It's going to be a record for us. Where are we at? I once again I forgot to start my recorder right away. So let's see. Where are we at?
See 120.
2106, 2107. That's where we're at. So
Okay.
yeah,
2107.
yeah. Boy, talk about pithy. You used the word pithy. We've
Yeah.
actually,
And I wasn't actually I was serious but not yeah. I our pithy would be different than what the actual definition is, I think. We
well,
we would not be
yeah.
as succinct as it well, at least I wouldn't.
Succinct is not our middle name, but as I said to Barry last week, I said we're not looking to do one of Eric and I's 3-hour extravaganzas here,
Right.
and we're not again. So to explain that, I sent Eric a quick text before we started recording and said, "Hey, we got to kind of keep this in with the extra episode this month." I have to keep an eye on how long an episode is because I have limited storage space on Libsyn. I use Libsyn for uploading episodes of the podcast, and I'm kind of grandfathered into this wonderful plan that I got years and years. I mean, what, 16 years ago or whatever, 18 years ago. I got this plan with Libsyn, and I'm kind of grandfathered into it, but it has limited storage space. So I always have to kind of watch how long the episodes are, and if they get too long, I have to play with the compression of it to get it to fit, you know.
Okay, that
And
makes sense.
so I
Yeah.
try not to go below 128 kilobits per second.
So we don't but there is times where I kind of sound like I'm underwater. So maybe
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah. Well, no, I don't think that's it.
Yeah, it's
But
probably just my audio.
if I can, I do 192.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's a good,
if I have to, I go down to 128,
which is fine,
and which is fine. And
especially for spoken.
technically, it's spoken, it's mono. There's only a few seconds of every show that's stereo, and it's that little opening
Yep.
thing, and the closing music is stereo. And I could create mono versions of either of those, and that would make it even better. But I've
Yeah.
tried exporting in mono, which would be, again, it would be fine. And of course, you get much smaller file sizes, but the music that I'm using gets totally screwed up,
Yeah.
totally screwed up.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
have to literally well, look, this sounds more extreme than it is. I have to remaster those intro and outro pieces so that they're truly mono,
Right.
and then I can export that way. But anyway, so if need be, I even go a little bit below 128. But if I can, 128 is usually the lowest I want to go at.
Right.
That's more than anyone wanted to know. But that is where we're at. 1430. All right. Well, let's get going.
Let's do this.
Okay. Here we go.
Okay.
Oop, my notes slipped away from me. Okay. Now here we go. in 3, 2, 1. It's for Mac Guys Only, episode number 426 for February 16th, 2024. Drobo Data Decampment. Hey everyone, welcome back to For Mac Guys Only, the show for the Mac community, where we share our thoughts and opinions on current Mac news and events. And joining me to talk file migration is my For Mac Guys Only co-host, Eric Erickson. Hey Eric, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Mike? I love the title, Drobo Data Decampment. Try saying that several times really fast. That
I dare not. I dare not.
You're not.
And yeah, I was looking for a little alliteration there, and decampment
Yes,
came up in the thesaurus. So there you go.
you found it.
And remember, everyone, we do record for Mac Guys Only Live on YouTube the second and fourth Friday of the month. And if you would like to come hang out and ask questions and be part of our live studio audience, and I see there's a few folks in there now, be sure to subscribe to the show at youtube.com/FMEOTV. And if you are joining us live, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat room too, which is over here to my right. So if you have any questions or comments as we move along, go ahead and drop them in the chat room and we'll try to address them here on the show. Well, Eric, we began our migration episodes with the big Evernote migration, and we are going to continue our conversation this week with one that came up thanks to a question from a photographer client of mine. Now, first, though, I do have a quick for Mac Guys Only update, including an update on Macstock. Yes, Macstock is back this year for our 8th in-person event. And while I can't give all the details quite yet, I can share the dates. So if you're interested in attending Macstock this year, be sure to mark the dates July 12th through the 14th, 2024 on your calendar. And to be one of the absolute first to learn when this year's weekend passes go on sale, which will be soon, I promise. Be sure to subscribe to the Macstock newsletter or follow Macstock on Mastodon at tooting.ninja at Macstock Expo. You can also do at For Mac Guys Only. I'm there too. And we actually have a really great lineup of presenters this. Man, what is wrong with my speaking today, Eric? And we have a great lineup of presenters this year. And I can already tell that this is going to be a year of talks not to be missed. Are you going to join us this year, Eric?
Yes, I am certainly going to try now that I'm actually a little bit closer and hopefully finally settled with my life now that we moved. So yeah, I definitely would love to. I wanted to get there so bad anyway. So yeah. Plus, this year it sounds really good too. So I think it's always good. And I'm always bummed when I miss it and miss some of the talks, and even just to hear you talk about some of them, yeah. So definitely I want to make it.
That would be awesome. That'd be awesome to see you this year. Well, as I mentioned, this week's topic came up when a long-time client of mine asked about her old Drobo and what she could possibly migrate to and how. And that's kind of the key to the conversation here today. She knew Drobo as a company is now pretty much defunct. Even though her Drobo is, or I should say now was, still working, she knew it was only a matter of time before something would go horribly, inextricably awry, and she would lose everything.
Right.
So, of course, considering the age of her Drobo and how little storage it actually offered, I believe her overall total was somewhere around 4 to 6 terabytes. That was what she had. So it was a 4-bay Drobo, and I think she had 1 to 2 terabyte drives in it. I can't remember exactly what she had in it, but it was a small amount of storage space, but it was an expensive device at the time she bought it. Well, The simple answer with that much storage space is to just purchase a big old external hard drive and migrate everything over to that. I mean, that's a super
Right.
simple solution.
Right.
Now, the problem with that, and I know you're already thinking this, Eric, the problem with that is redundancy. Now,
Yeah.
the beauty of the Drobo is that it offered an easy to manage bit of redundancy for your data across all the drives that were installed. So if any single drive failed, well, the device might limp along a little bit, but you could then replace that failed drive, and the Drobo
Easily
would,
enough.
it would adopt it, and
Yep.
that's not the terminology they used, but it would adopt it and it would add it to the mix
Right.
for keeping the data safe, right?
Yep.
And in her case, and I mentioned this before show recording, in her case, that data is years and years of client photos. Now, if you purchase an external drive, that's cheap, especially these days. I mean, it's
Yeah.
almost nothing to buy a 4 or 6 or even 8 terabyte
Oh,
drive any longer,
yeah.
especially a traditional drive. I mean, if you're talking
Right.
SSDs, it's obviously a lot more expensive, but
Yeah.
a traditional hard drive is, I mean, that's
Yeah.
almost an entry level point these days to get a 2 or 4 terabyte drive.
Oh, easily.
But of course, the problem is to achieve that redundancy, you really want to purchase a second drive. And then you want to mirror them. You want to mirror them on some sort of scheduled basis. Don't rely upon your own memory to keep a copy of one drive on the other, because
Right.
that just, in my experience, that doesn't work. I cannot reliably remember to mirror one drive to another. I need some sort of scheduled action to happen so that it takes place
To do
automatically,
that. Yep.
right? The other option, of course, would be to rely upon some sort of cloud service. There are several cloud services that allow you to back up external drives. Some don't, some do. So it's something to look at before you sign up for a service. But make sure that you sign up for a service that allows you to back up external USB drives to the cloud, and that certainly would be a legitimate way to go if you wanted to. It does provide you a backup or redundant copy of that data for moving forward. But if you think about recommended backups, if you have your photos stored on an external drive and you're backing up to the cloud,
Right.
that's 2 copies, right?
Yep.
And what is our recommendation always, even if we don't follow this advice ourselves, and I don't always, I try to the best of my abilities, but the recommendation is always 3 copies, a
Yep.
minimum of 3 copies. And that kind of comes
Copies.
back from, you have your computer in front of you, you have your Mac in front of you, your data is on that Mac, that's 1 copy. And then you have your time machine backup, and that's a second copy. And then maybe you make a clone of your Mac's drive with Carbon Copy Cloner or Super Duper, or
Right.
you use a cloud storage service. Some way to achieve that third copy of your data so that any one of those three could fail, and you'd be in much better shape than if,
Shape and yeah.
right.
If the only one you had failed. Right.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, as I said, that can be achieved with Time Machine and a giant external drive, and it would have to be
Yeah.
a giant external drive that's backing up both your Mac and your external drive that you're using to replace the Drobo.
Right.
And then, of course, you have to have both connected to your Mac simultaneously. You have to have your
Yes.
Time Machine drive connected. You have to have your Drobo replacement connected. But it can be done. It can also be done with a second external hard drive and scheduled mirroring, like I mentioned, Carbon Copy Cloner or Super Duper or ChronoSync. ChronoSync's a good one for doing that. I like to use ChronoSync
I,
for
I
mirroring
use
drives.
Yep. I love that. Yeah.
Yep. And it could also be achieved with a second external hard drive. Now, this is a little bit nerdier, but it could be achieved with a second external hard drive and then setting up a RAID 1 array. RAID 1 being a mirrored array. In other words, as you
Right.
write to the drive, it mirrors to the other one automatically. You can do that in disk utility. Disk utility
Right.
will let you take two drives and create a RAID array out of them. And we won't get into the nitty gritty of all the different types of RAID arrays, but RAID 1 is a mirrored array. Okay, so you could do something like that as well. Or while it may not be exactly the same, you can achieve something like this with a Synology network attached storage box, or a NAS. I'm going to probably be saying NAS multiple times during this, and that stands
Yeah.
for network attached storage.
Storage. Yeah.
And you can configure that NAS similarly to the Drobo, where you have multiple drives in a RAID array. And Synology has their own type of RAID. It's called an SHR RAID. They also have an SHR2 RAID. And those are actually probably the most equivalent to the Drobo.
Oh, right. Synology hybrid RAID. Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go. Synology Hybrid
Yep.
RAID. That's exactly what it stands for. Yeah. And the reason that's closest to the Drobo is because the Drobo allowed you to just take any old drive and slam it into the slots, and it would just
Yep.
say, cool, it'll start using them. Well, that's what the SHR RAIDs do.
Yeah.
You can use drives of varying sizes, as they say.
Yeah.
And that's great. I've thought about now. I don't actually have a Synology NAS myself. I know you do, and so I knew this would be a good conversation to have focused on that brand specifically. But I came this close to buying a Synology NAS last fall, and it was interesting because I could actually cobble together a decent number of drives just from my collection of old hard drives that came out of my old Mac Pro. I mean, I had anything from 2 to 4 terabyte drives that I could easily put in there
Yeah.
and set up an SHR RAID. That's a little redundant, but an SHR
Yeah.
RAID with Synology, and use all those old drives,
Yeah.
and
Reuse
that
them. Yeah.
that would have been great. And the neat thing about SHR2, well, actually, their regular RAID does this as well with Synology, but it offers something they call data protection. So there's a little section of all the drives set aside for that redundancy, that data protection.
Right.
And I looked it up here. SHR gives one drive redundancy, and SHR2 gives you two drive redundancy. And that's kind of the big difference between those two.
And Drobo had something similar. They started out with one drive. You could lose one drive, and then they added that ability to where you could lose up to two drives. I've never used that on Drobo or Synology. I've just always had the one drive.
And I'm sure you encountered situations where one of the drives failed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In fact, I just did probably just before like last late November, early December. Drive failed, and it wasn't that old. And in fact, it wasn't that old, and it was a Western Digital. I always get Western Digital pretty much. It was
yeah, me
a
too.
refurbished drive that I got off of Amazon. So I I've learned I'm not going to get a refurbished drive anymore because it was a great price, and it was I shouldn't say it was renewed. So
Renewed.
yeah, and so not doing that again. So yeah, I started having trouble, and uh, just ended up. Yeah, I think I came into the office one day, and all of a sudden, one of the lights was amber, and there was beeping going on, and I'm like, "All right, that's it." So I ordered a new
Am-
one, and that
Amber lights and beeping are never good.
no, never
No.
good. No,
And I'm not ashamed to admit, as soon as you said refurbished or renewed drive, hair started standing up on the back of my neck. Like, no, please, no.
yeah,
I have purchased some nice drives from Otherworld Computing, OWC, and I usually purchase new Western Digital drives.
Yeah.
Now they have a whole range of different drives. Western Digital Red drives are made for network attached storage
Yep.
devices. Western Digital Black are typically considered a high performance type drive. Western Digital Blue are considered their kind of consumer or everyday type drives. And the Western Digital Green, and they have more than this. They have purple, and they have all kinds of
Gold.
uh,
Yeah.
drives. Purple's meant for surveillance systems, and I don't know why that's really necessarily different than
Yeah.
NAS. But
Right.
anyway, purple is intended for surveillance systems, and I think it's just because of the durability of being on for extended periods of time throughout the years.
Right. Right.
And what am I missing here? Oh, green. Green is their uh, efficient efficient drives, low power
Eco. Yeah.
drives, eco
Yeah.
drives. Yeah, I have not had a good experience with the green drives. They they don't perform as well. I've noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't used them.
If your sole goal
I,
is lots and lots of storage, I think it's a great drive. But as a
yeah,
primary drive, I can from firsthand experience don't
pretty slow.
don't recommend a green as a primary boot drive, if you will. I
Okay.
always go Western Digital Black now.
That makes sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Anyway, Western Digital drives aside, yeah, so you can set up a Synology SHR array, and that would work very similarly to how the Drobo worked. Mix and match drive types, mix and match brands, mix and match sizes. It works great. And in the event of a failure, you can replace any one of the drives and be on your way again. It'll automatically rebuild when you replace the drive, which is cool. Now, in all those scenarios, of course, for the third copy, and depending upon the level of redundancy that you're comfortable with for the data that's being stored, all of these can be combined with another means of backup, whether it's a clone, whether it's cloud storage, whatever it is, you can combine these to get that third backup. If you're not comfortable with relying upon redundancy alone, which you probably shouldn't be, because in theory, two drives could fail. Three
Right.
drives could fail. You
Right.
could have some sort of catastrophic electrical failure that takes out the device and the drives within it.
Right.
You
Right.
can't rely upon redundancy of data as being a backup, but it does give that nice little extra layer for any one drive failing within the NAS itself. It doesn't, it or shouldn't be considered a backup as such. Just because your data is redundant doesn't mean it's backed up. So you do
Right.
still want to
Right.
consider other
Correct.
means of keeping it backed up.
Act
But
up. Yep.
like I said, it depends on the level of redundancy and the number of backups that you have that you're comfortable with for the type of data. For the photographer, client photography, I think having yet another means to back it up on top of the NAS would be a fantastic way to go.
Yep. Yep.
Now, we're talking about the different types of RAID and how you can mix and match drives. I'm actually going to refer everyone to the Synology RAID calculator. This is an awesome, awesome page on Synology site.
Yeah.
You can literally design and configure your Synology NAS right there on the page. You click the type of drives you have, and it will show you based on the type of array that you select how your data will be used or how those drives will be used to store your data. It'll show you
And
how
in,
much of it will be used for redundancy or for data protection. It'll show you how much will be used for storage, how much will be used for the system, and even how much will not be used. So, for example, if you're mixing and matching drive sizes, watch for that unused space, especially if you're going with a traditional RAID, because you may want to adjust the types and sizes of drives to make sure that you're not wasting space.
right. Right.
In
Get
just
as close
playing with
to
it,
the
oh, go ahead. I'm
size.
sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, yeah, get as close to the same size drives as you can. I've had my own experience with it, I've had a little the what it calculates as the amount of space that total amount of space that you have will have. I've had less than that in reality, and I don't know. It could very well be how I have my stuff configured. But right now, I have a 5 bay Drobo,
Hmm.
and I have 10 terabytes in each slot.
Oh, nice.
And I think I'm trying to think. I think I'm supposed to have 40 terabytes, but I think in reality I have 34. So with the data protect, whatever the case, it's enough. So it would it be nice to have more? Yeah, just because I do use it for backups, and I also use it for Time Machine and stuff. Although I have kind of moved my Time Machine off of there now, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so two important points there. 5 bays, 10 terabytes apiece. Keep in mind too, and I guess we'll explain to folks here. You use yours for videography,
right, and among other things, yeah, yeah,
among other things.
right,
But
yeah,
you do need a lot of storage space to keep
yes,
these projects that you're working on. So
yeah.
I know folks who are using even larger drives, 18 terabyte.
Oh,
18 is that
yeah.
yeah,
Well, you can get up to 22, I think.
and they're working on even larger drives than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one thing. You can easily get by for a typical home. I think you could probably get by with 4 or 8 terabyte drives in there,
Sure. Easily.
if not even smaller. It just depends on how
Right.
much you need to store and how you want to use that Synology. Now, this is
Right.
not a
Right.
review of Synology. It's not to go, we're not intending to go in depth on all the features, but there's all kinds of amazing things you can do with it,
Yeah.
including mimicking the way Dropbox works
Yeah.
from out and about. Talk about notes migration. It has its own note server and apps that you
Right.
can run on iOS and Android and Mac and probably Windows. I'm sure Windows. I mean, there's so many things you can do with it, and that's just two small things you can do with it. Of course, a file share in your home, you can use it, as you pointed out, for Time Machine backups. The note there, of course, is if you're using it for Time Machine backups and what you're backing up is the data that's on the Drobo, I don't think that's particularly
Yeah.
a good way to
Right.
go.
No. Yeah.
But
No.
I don't mean Drobo, I mean the Synology on the NAS.
Right.
So if you're using it to
Yeah.
back up your Mac to there, and you're using
Right.
it to back up other Macs in the household to there, that's an awesome way to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many. I mean, the reason I was looking at the Synology NAS box is because I was looking at all the services I'm paying annual fees for
Right.
and
Yes.
realizing that I could probably replace darn near every single one of them with this single box.
Ditch a lot of them. Yeah. And just get it. Yeah. Exactly. No.
Yeah.
And I do really utilize and like Synology Drive. They've they used to be called Cloud Station, and but it's always does it obviously offer every feature that Dropbox does? No, but it works really quite well. And speaking of which, too, there's also like a chat or a messages um,
Yes.
part in there, and my wife and daughter and I use that as well at times. So it just is another you know avenue to send and receive messages, and it's pretty interesting actually. In the admin part of it, that's in the disk station, that software, even having admin access to it, I can't see messages that are sent back and forth. It's all done within the the software itself, and it's all encrypted. So there's no way you could set up an account there and use it with somebody else that you knew, and I wouldn't be able to see any of the messages that you're sending. So it's really actually done quite well.
For folks who are using Google Chat or any other chat system out there and are concerned about their data sitting out there in the cloud on servers that they don't control,
Yes. Yes.
this completely answers that question
Right.
or
Yeah.
concern.
Yeah.
You are in control of this server, and
Right.
you decide what can and can't be shared, and how it can be shared, and who can see it and who can't see it. And yeah, it's amazing all the services that come out of the box with those
Yeah.
Synologies. Now this
It
isn't a
does.
commercial for Synology, and I don't intend
Right.
it to
Right.
be.
Right.
I
Yep.
did want to say before we continue, uh, I, I want to point out that this conversation is not exclusive to Drobo or to Synology.
Right.
You might have an old failing drive of any brand, and that includes any old NAS as well. Likewise, you might opt to go with a different brand NAS or a different brand of external storage. So, while some of the steps of what we're going to cover today are specific to Synology, and there's one in particular that's specific to them, but I'm sure you can adopt it to other brands and other devices. So I just wanted to get that out of the way.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's Drobo, it doesn't matter if it's a Synology. The concept, the overarching concept of what we're talking about, remains the same. So cool. All right. Cool. So client says we're going with the Synology NAS to replace the Drobo. How do we get that data from the Drobo to the Synology?
Right.
Well, the first thing to know, and I'll ask you which one you had in just a second here, but the first thing to know is what type of Drobo do you have? Is it the USB only model, or is it one of the N models, which is the networked model? Or I guess you could call it a NAS. I guess you could say it's a
Yeah.
network attached storage. It is literally that, network attached
Yeah.
storage. Not maybe not as full featured as something like a Synology, but it is network attached storage. So do you have an N model that can be network attached, or do you have a USB only model? Which one did you have, Eric?
I actually the Drobo I had the USB model and then the FireWire
Oh
one
gosh.
when it did come out, and then ultimately and this is what kind of killed it for me, but I had the 8-bay iSCSI Drobo, so it actually had two Ethernet jacks in there, and it worked off iSCSI, and I think the Synology also does the same thing. But yeah, so it started out just the basically the external drive type, like RAID box, you want to say,
Mm-hmm.
plugged in through FireWire or USB, and then I moved to that other iSCSI one. But yeah, so yeah,
So we're going to set aside FireWire for the moment.
yeah.
Now, I think even the FireWire models had USB though, didn't they?
Trying to think,
I
they
can't.
very well could have.
I
Yeah,
can't, I
yeah.
can't remember now. Uh,
I know.
yeah, so we'll set aside. There are adapters. You can get
Right.
adapters. In fact, I
Yeah.
have an adapter at the office that's a FireWire 800 adapter, and it
Yeah.
works. I mean, it works. It does what it's supposed to do. The one I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
is, gosh, I don't even know if they still sell these, but it was an official Apple one, and it worked just fine for what I needed at the time. I can't
Yeah.
think of the last time I plugged it in, but I have it. When I need it, I have
You've
it,
got
and
it.
it's ready to go. See, and we complained about Apple's dongle sickness, but anyway,
Right.
yeah, here I've got this dongle, and I'm ready to go when I need it.
Yeah.
Let's assume USB. Let's assume USB. And the reason I say let's assume USB is because that's a very straightforward way to go. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Pretty
when
ubiquitous too.
Yeah, when I said I wanted to talk about this, you said that you had used an entirely different method of transferring the data from Drobo to Synology, and I want to ask you about that. But with USB, it's actually pretty straightforward. Now,
It is.
the Synology is going to be sitting on your network, and you're going to connect to it like any other network device. Now, you can or you probably will use SMB, won't you? Is
Yeah. SMB is the
I'm thinking
logical.
that's
That's the best way to do it.
the way
Yeah.
to go. That's the most compatible.
Yeah.
There are various Apple file protocols that you can use to connect to it as well, but I think SMB is probably the
Yeah, I think anymore now, SMB is, I don't want to say it's the only way because it's not the only way, but it is pretty much the preferred way. I don't, there was something Synology wasn't going to support AFP anymore, or it does so in certain circumstances. But otherwise, yeah, SMB is the way to go.
and you can do that through the Finder,
Right.
right? So in the
Yeah.
Finder, you have the well, it's under the Go menu. It's under the Go menu. There's Connect
Yeah.
to Server, and you're gonna yeah, I mean, you can literally browse your network for the server. And the neat thing
Right.
about that is you can the command is smb colons slash slash, and well, that would be the slash under the question mark. Let's just right
Right.
now, we got criticized for this because I said it wrong. That's the forward slash.
Right. Yes. Forward slash. Yeah. Yeah.
Forward
That's
slash
the
and
forward slash.
backslash. That's the
Yeah.
forward slash. Yeah, so it's
Yes.
gosh, I hope I got that right now. SMB colon slash slash. It's the one under the question mark on the US keyboard. See, we also got in
Yes.
trouble for that too because other keyboards it's in a different location. On the US keyboard, it's under the question mark.
Right. That's the forward slash. The
That's the
one under the
forward
question
slash.
mark. Okay.
And,
See, I
and,
always screw those up too.
and then the
I want
name
to
of the
say the other
device.
one is.
You
Yeah.
know what I should do? Okay, I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna look it up right now as we're talking and make sure. Oh, it
Yeah.
doesn't
Get
say.
the.
I was gonna look it up in Popcar.
Oh, why doesn't it say in that? That's weird. Let
Yeah,
me. What if
it
you did a
describes
search
it
for it?
as Solidus.
Oh, let me
Yeah,
see.
that's not
Forward
really. That's not.
slash.
Yeah. All right.
No.
Anyway,
No, it doesn't. You're
yeah,
right.
it doesn't. Well, and then the backslash is referred to as reverse Solidus. Oh,
Yeah, I see that.
okay. Look, Popcar. All
We
right.
don't need
Anyway,
that.
we don't need
Yeah.
that. All right. Anyway, SMB colon slash slash forward slash forward slash, and then the name of the server. That's
Right.
that's really it. Click connect. You'll be connected up to it. You may have to put in a username and password, and then you'll have access to that drive. And of course, you're going to need read and write access to the location of the drive where you want to connect or where you want to copy the files to. Right.
Right. Yep.
So that's all part of the Synology setup. When you're creating the file shares, you're going to create a file share that offers read and write capability to the account that you are going to be connecting to that NAS with. Right?
Right.
And then you can literally drag and drop or copy and paste from the Drobo that's connected via USB to the Synology NAS that you're connected to through the network. You can do that.
Yep.
It's not the best. If you encounter errors, it's problematic sometimes going back and figuring out what copied, what didn't copy, what's a partial copy. If you are going to drag and drop or if you're going to copy and paste files and folders from one to the other, I recommend doing it in chunks.
Yeah. Yes.
You agree with
and
that?
yeah. And yeah, well, I don't want to step on something you might say later. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Copy
Go
in
ahead.
chunks.
Go ahead. It's
I,
probably what I'm going to say next.
well, I was just going to say for stuff like this and for just like a ton of data, I've tended to use either Carbon Copy Cloner or ChronoSync just because whenever I have huge file copies, even if it's just in the Finder, going from one thing to another, I've just started using using that a long time ago, just because I think one, it probably overall it's faster, and two, it takes care of the errors. I've run into way too many big copies where it'll copy through and then all of a sudden it'll hit something and it'll just stop and say, sorry, I can't do this.
It just stopped,
And
it fails, and you have to figure out
yeah,
what copied and what didn't copy, or just delete everything and start over. It's
right.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just wasted a whole bunch of time for nothing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, my second suggestion is Carbon Copy Cloner or ChronoSync, Eric.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Good.
probably Carbon Copy Cloner. I think that's a
Yeah.
nice,
Yeah.
straightforward, easy way to go. I love the interface on it. ChronoSync is great, especially if you want to schedule copies. So if you want to
Yeah.
schedule a copy
Yeah.
for a certain time, but even the trial version of Carbon Copy Cloner, you can select your Drobo, you can select your network location, you can choose the
Right.
files you want to copy, and you can start the process. And like you said, there is error recovery in both of these. So when there's a problem, it will, unless you tell it otherwise, it'll often pop up and say, "Hey, I've got a problem. I can't read this file. I can't do
Right.
this, whatever. Do you want to continue? Do you want to stop?" And you can also tell it, "Hey, do this for every future error." So if there's an error, you can check the little box and say, "Do this for future errors, just continue." And the nice thing about both of these is there's a log. There's a log file
Right.
of what happened during the copy process. So you can go back and see what failed. And oftentimes I've had file copy failures when doing some sort of automated mass copy like that. And I go back and I manually copy and paste or what have you, drag and drop that one file, and it works fine. Like it was just some sort of intermittent problem. And, heck, with USB, with networks, it could be anything. So,
Right.
yeah, that is a great way to go. Carbon Copy Cloner or ChronoSync.
I was thinking.
Okay. Um, you I'm gonna switch back over to me, Eric. This is just a little edit
Okay.
point here. I'm gonna switch over to me.
Yep.
Um, you want me to hold up here for? I'll hold up here. I'll hold up here.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay. You guys got me for a couple seconds. Eric had to run to the door for a second. Um, so I'm curious, for those of you that are watching, you could drop this in the chat room if you want while we're on a little break here. Um, have you done this sort of thing? Have you had to do mass copies of data from one device to another, whether it be something like a Drobo or something like a Synology, or even just one large hard drive to another because you thought that was going to fail on you, or you are having failures with it? And if you have, what methods have you used to do the copies? Um, Very often, if it's just drive to drive, that copy and paste or drag and drop is a great way to go, as we said. If you don't have a license to Carbon Copy Cloner or ChronoSync, then I think Carbon Copy Cloner is a great way to go, because the trial version of it, which does have some some pretty big limitations, but the trial version of it does allow you to do, blanket copies from one device to another without all the little fine tuning that you get with the paid version. But it is a good way to go. So I'm just kind of curious, if you're watching and you've had to do this sort of thing, how you've done it. Um, let's see. So I'm actually going to hold off on the third option when you have a USB Drobo. This is what Eric and I were debating real quick while he was running out. Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna hold off on that because I think he may have some items to add to this, and I want to make sure he gets his comments in while we're talking about it. But as a little preview, it's if you have a USB Drobo, you can actually connect that Drobo directly to the NAS box. NAS boxes have USB ports on them, or many of them do. Not all of them do, but many of them have a USB port on it, and you can connect that USB Drobo directly to it. And then there are two different ways. Well, off the top of my head, when I was putting together the notes, there are two different ways that you can then copy the files from the Drobo to the Synology. I should probably write down about where we were when this break happened. I'm going to say it was about roughly. There we go. Okay. So I know where the edit point is. Okay. So some of the other things we're going to cover, connecting directly to, and then what we're working our way towards is yet another way, especially if your Drobo is an N model, would be to do a network device to network device copy as well. And I am pretty sure that Eric is going to have some comments on that as well. That actually, thinking about it, I believe most of the N model Drobos have USB as well. It's not the fastest in the world, but they have USB as well. And I think I would probably recommend what we're talking about right now over a network to network copy, which can be slower depending on how your network's configured at home. But it is an option, and it's something that you could set up and just kind of let run while the files are copied from one to the other. Going back a couple minutes here to what I mentioned earlier, the RAID calculator. The neat thing about the RAID calculator, the Synology RAID calculator, is here. I'm going to pull it up here real quick while we're waiting. Is we were talking about the different types of RAID arrays, and if you go to the RAID calculator at Synology.com, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes. If you go there, you can say, okay, let's just play with this for a second. I've got two 1 terabyte drives, I've got one 2 terabyte drive, and I've got one 6 terabyte drive. Let's say that's what we have. The interesting thing is if I choose SHR, which is as we said, the Synology hybrid RAID array. If I choose that, what we end up with now, we're looking at total number of drives 4, and we've got 10 terabytes total, two 1 terabyte drives, one 2 terabyte, and one 6, right? Because we have that 6 thrown in there, we're going to end up with wasted space because the Drobo needs that data redundancy. So in order to achieve data redundancy for that 6 terabyte drive, which is theoretically where a good chunk of your data could be, we're going to have some wasted space. So with the Synology hybrid RAID, 37 gig of the drive is being used by the system. 3.6 terabytes is available for you to store your files. 3.6 out of 10, mind you. 1.8 is being used for the data protection, and another 3.6 terabytes is just wasted space. And again, that's because the software, the RAID, the array that we have set up here, needs to be able to assure that the data on that 6 terabyte drive is just as protected as the data on a 1 terabyte drive. So that's why we have all that wasted space. Now, if we were to go with a RAID 5, which is kind of a little bit more traditional type of RAID to go with in this type of situation, a RAID 5 will give you one drive redundancy. Let me think this through. It'll give you one drive redundancy and does not really allow for drives of varying sizes. It's certainly not optimized for that. Well, if you go with a RAID 5 with that same scenario, two 1 terabytes, one 2 terabyte, and one 6 terabyte, what we end up with is the same 37.3 gig used by the system, 2.7 terabytes used. Hey, Eric, I was just going over the Synology RAID calculator. 2.7 terabytes for data storage, under a terabyte for protection, and 5.5 terabytes wasted space. And again,
Right.
that's because one of the drives is 6 terabytes. and the software
Yeah.
needs to make sure that the data on that 6 terabyte drive is just as protected as the data on the 1 terabyte drive.
Y-
So,
You know, the
yeah, go ahead.
amazing thing with, I was going to say, with the Synology and the Drobo, it manages to protect your data on all the drives using only about a third of the drive space. And I guess that's fairly close to RAID 4 and 5. I know that's kind of the way they work too. It distributes the data across all of the drives, but it doesn't, I don't know if it uses some sort of compression or whatever, but because it doesn't, you would expect if you have, let's say, 10 terabytes of total storage,
Hmm.
that to back that up, you would need 5 terabytes, but it doesn't end up being like that. It ends up being more like, you know, 3.2 tera, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, it is interesting, and it's also interesting how by making just a couple simple changes to the types of or the size of drives that you're using. In the scenario I was giving, we had one 6 terabyte drive, a 2 terabyte drive, and two 1 terabyte drives. Now, by just switching this up a little bit and changing those 1 terabyte drives to 2 terabyte drives and changing the 6 terabyte drive to a 4 terabyte drive, we actually
It's huge.
increase the amount of storage available for our data
Yep. Yep.
because it's no longer trying to make sure that all 6 terabytes of the other drive are protected. So in an SHR array, we end up with 7.2 terabytes of the, what is it now? We're at 12 of the 12 that we're putting in there. We end up with 7.2 for storage, 3.6 for data protection, and the original
Yeah.
37.3 gig for system.
Right.
That's the Synology hybrid RAID, but still
Yeah.
RAID 5. This is where this is kind of fun. I can just play with the RAID calculator all day.
I know.
The
I know.
the the RAID 5, we still have, because RAID 5 is not optimized for drives of different sizes like what we're throwing
Different
in there.
sizes.
We still have 3.6 terabytes wasted space.
Yeah.
So this
Yep.
tool is super important to use if you're thinking about getting a Synology NAS. Be sure, I'll put the link to this in the show notes. Be sure um, to use the Synology RAID calculator, because you can sit there and play with it and optimize the types of drives you have and how much storage they're going to use based on the type of RAID array that you've selected.
Yeah.
So,
I actually have that page bookmarked. And
actually, I do too.
and yeah, I, I've used it enough and been there enough that and and I guess to Drobo's defense, it had something similar. Although I do like how this one works. It I don't know. It's easy to work and easy to see just how everything's going to shake out. And
Yeah.
yeah, when I was looking at expanding my storage, because I think I had pretty much the largest drives I had in there were 4 terabytes, and I had a bunch of 4 terabyte drives. And then when I looked at when I lost a drive, or a drive had to replace it, I thought, what am I going to go towards? And I decided to go to 10. So then I put a 10 terabyte in there, and of course I had a bunch of storage not used. But eventually, um, I replaced all those drives, and including one where I think I just ended up replacing two at once. So, but yeah, no, it works great, and you stick it in there, and it does all the copying and everything, so you don't have to like, oh, I got to move all this off to another place and then move that data back over. You just say, you pop out the old drive, stick in the new one, and it goes crazy for a little bit, but then and it takes a day or two to get everything propagated, but it does all that for you. So that, again, that was one of the things that people loved about Drobo too. So you don't lose any of that. It works terrific.
Um, okay, so we'll restart the episode here. We were talking about copying from a USB Drobo to a Synology NAS, and again, the type of NAS doesn't really matter. But the reason I wanted to make sure you were in here is for this third option. So we talked about drag and drop, we talked about copy and paste, we talked about Carbon Copy Cloner and ChronoSync. The third option is just as valid as the other options we just spoke of, and that is to connect the USB Drobo directly to the Synology NAS box. Many of the
Right.
Synology boxes have a USB in port on them, and you can literally connect that Drobo to it just like it's an external USB drive to the Synology. And then there are a couple options at that point that you can use. Now, I'm basing this on what is the current version of what they call DSM, which is the system software that's running on
Just
this
just station management.
disk
Yep,
station, yep, disk station manager, DSM 7. I'm basing this on, which I believe is the current version.
it
But
is.
there are two options, and the first option is something that's relatively easy to use, and that's called File Station. With File Station,
Yep.
there's a way to transfer files and folders within the same Synology NAS. So, in other words, with the USB Drobo connected to it, it's going to be considered part of that Synology NAS at that point. You can also use File Station to copy between two different Synology NAS boxes, but we're going to be copying from the Drobo to a folder, on the NAS itself. And interestingly, the option is pretty much exactly the same as what we just talked about. So you connect this up as a USB drive. The drive is going to show up within File Station as an option to, browse the files and folders that are on it, and then you can copy and paste. You can you can copy and paste from that external drive to a folder on the internal drives, or the internal
Yep.
array, I should say, the internal RAID array of the drive. You can just copy and paste. You can do it by way of the file menu within File Station. There's options there to copy and then to paste. You can do it with Control C and Control V. That works as well. And I believe you have to use Control within it when you're connected to the Synology NAS. You're going to be using, it's a web interface that you use to connect into it. And I
Right.
believe that it's looking for Control, not Command. On the Mac, we're using Command C, Command V, and
Right.
you're looking at Control C and Control V. In other words, similar to what you would use on Windows.
Windows. I'm trying to think. I think you're right. Yeah.
And then, yeah, that's it. Oh, you can drag and drop as well. You can also drag and drop. So the options that
Yes.
we talked
Yep.
about when you're using the Finder, when you're using Mac OS to do this process, and we talked about drag and drop, we talked about copy and paste, and we talked about using Carbon Copy Cloner, that's pretty much mirrored when you're using File Station directly through the Synology NAS interface. When you're using it through the web
Yes.
interface, it's like you're using, well, you are literally using a different operating system, and you're using a different file manager within that operating system,
Right.
much like you might if you're sitting down at a Linux box or a Windows box. So you can use those same commands: drag and drop, copy and
Yeah.
paste, use the file menus, whatever, and you can get it from one device to the other. Now, the other option that I came across, and I didn't even know that this existed, quite frankly, but there is an app on the DSM called USB Copy.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting because USB Copy, as I was reading up on it, is very, very similar to Carbon Copy Cloner in terms of what you're doing and how you're using it. With Carbon Copy Cloner, you set up these what do they call them in Carbon Copy? Is it like activities, or I can't remember what they call it?
Tasks or
Tasks.
container. Yeah, tasks. I think.
Yeah, so you're setting up a task, and that task might be to copy the files from the USB Drobo to this, network device that you have, your Synology NAS, for example. That's a
Right.
task that you create, and you run that task. Well, The USB copy is very, very similar to that. You create tasks, and that task then, when you run it, will complete the action that you programmed it to complete. It sounds like it's more complicated than it is. It's very straightforward. Now, because I just came
It
across
is.
this, I've not used it personally. I've used the file station method to copy files, but I've never used USB copy. Have you used it, Eric?
I have not either, actually, and I had forgotten about it until you just said it. So yeah, I was not aware, nor was I aware that it was is close to carbon copy cloner, as you mentioned. So
Well,
yeah,
close to it in the sense that the the steps you have to go through to get it to do what you want it to do are similar. In other words, you have
right,
to kind of set up these tasks.
yeah, yeah,
And
and I
that
haven't, yeah,
yeah. And let's see. I think yeah. In fact, I just pulled it up. They call them tasks in USB copy.
okay,
So
so that makes sense.
when
Yeah,
you've got it all set up and you tell it what you want to copy, what you don't want to copy, what you want to exclude in the copy, then you click run, and it performs that task that you configured it for. So there you go. That would be yet another option, and I'm actually going to put a link to that in the show notes as well. So I'll put a link to the knowledge base article at Synology for using FileStation to copy within the same Synology NAS, and I'll also put a link to the knowledge base article on using USB copy. Now, are there any other methods that you can think of, Eric, for copying from a USB Drobo to something like a Synology NAS?
no, not you actually got everything. Um, yeah, no, that's all. Yeah, you've hit everything that I can think of.
Okay. Well, I'm going to touch on something I mentioned when you stepped out and we were on the little break there. I mentioned that we were going to talk about this other method as well, and that's copying from a N model Drobo, in other words, a networked Drobo, to your network to edge storage box. But before I do that, when I showed you the link to that article, you said, "Oh, that's really interesting." You used an entirely different method. How did you
Yeah,
get everything moved over? Do you remember?
I think I think it was kind of a combination. Now it's been a while ago, and I want to say that um, I I think a lot of it I never used the USB um, copy method. One of the things was because I think in the original Drobo that I mean, sorry, original disk station that I had did not have a USB port. No, it did, but I just didn't use it. A vast majority of it I copied over just using SMB, just using the networking protocol. I did use File Station for a number of things, although I've ended up using File Station more for files on there than I have for copying back and forth. Um, but yeah, most of everything that I've copied over, it's been through SMB and to the network sharing protocols on the Mac, just because I was copying it from other drives too. I
Ah,
had a huge
okay.
video collection that I brought over, as well as music um, and a lot of those things. I just did via the normal networking protocols. And now that you have been mentioning USB copy and some of these, I that does sound like it would have been better, but I didn't really realize it at the time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because this last method I wanted to mention still uses FileStation. We just talked about using FileStation to copy from a USB Drobo to
Yeah.
the Synology NAS. Well, we're still going to use FileStation here. It's really the method by which we connect the Drobo to the Synology or to any other NAS box. This, again, would work with just about any other NAS box that I can think of. They almost all have this method of connecting to a network Drobo. But you can do Drobo NAS to Synology NAS. You can do it over your network. It might be slower than doing a direct copy. In fact, I
Right.
would say it's probably going to be slower than if you connected a USB Drobo directly to the Synology. That's probably the fastest way to do it, but it's a way to do it. And if your Drobo doesn't have USB, and I'm pretty sure the networked versions of Drobo also had USB.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right. Yeah, I think they all did. I
Yeah.
I think at the very
Or
least they had
FireWire.
USB. Yeah, or FireWire.
So that may be, if it's an option, that may be the best way to go. But I did want to cover this because it's really not that difficult to set up. There are a couple of requirements, of course. One is, as we said, it has to be an N model Drobo. It has to be a NAS, a network attached storage model of Drobo. So it has to have N in the
Right.
model number. So that's one. And this might seem obvious, but it's important to point out both your Synology NAS and your Drobo need to be on the same network, right? That
Right.
is the only way they're going to see each other and be able to communicate with each other. And then
Exactly.
third, the SMB slash CIFS service. Now, we've been mentioning SMB, which is, I always think of it as a Windows format or a Windows protocol for networking.
Right.
It stands
It's
for uh, server message block. Server message block is what
yeah.
it stands for. Why I remember that, I don't know. But SMB stands for server message block, and it's. I always think of it as a Windows protocol because it kind of came out of the Windows world, and it's become kind of the, as we said, kind of the standard way to network between home devices. But
Right.
they refer to it as SMB slash CIFS. CIFS is um, Common Internet. What is it? Common Internet File System? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so. Common in I always think FS is file system
File system.
and TFS, AFS, or whatever.
Now,
Yeah.
I, it's kind of it's like a subset of SMB. So that's why they refer to it as SMB slash CIFS. And
Right.
I believe something like the latest SMB, where are they at now? Three? SMB three,
I
if
think
not
so.
newer,
SMB3.
uh, would supersede it. You know, you're going to want, if you have the option to use the newer SMB protocols, you're going to want to use those. Oh, by the way, a very common thing you might hear is of Samba, SAMBA. Samba
Right.
is kind of the
Sama, yep.
open source implementation of SMB protocol. And so
Okay. That's
a
what I
lot of
always
these
wondered if okay.
a lot of these boxes are going to be probably technically using Samba because they're very often running Linux and they're going to be using open source
Open source.
versions
Yeah.
of this stuff. But anyway, so Samba is how do I describe this? It's an
It's just the
implementation of
open source.
SMB. It's like the open
Right,
source
right.
version
The
of
open source.
SMB.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, it is its own version of SMB, and it's something that you'll find on Linux boxes and routers and network attached storage boxes and things like that, because almost all of them use some variant of Linux as its underpinnings.
Right.
Anywho,
Which Synology does as well.
which Synology does as well. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
To
the SMB slash CIFS service has to be enabled on the Drobo for the folder or folders that you want to mount or that you want to connect to from the Synology. So that's the third most important thing. Now, to mount that folder on the Synology, again, we're going to go into File Station. So you're going to go into File Station, you're going to go into the Tools, and much like we did on the Mac we went to Go, right? And we went to Connect to Server.
Yep.
Well, in File Station on Synology, you're going to go to Tools and then Mount Remote Folder. And then I don't know why they don't say SMB shared folder. They call it CIFS shared folder. And
Right.
then it's going to prompt you for that folder. And much like Connect to Server on the Mac, where you have to put in the name of your server that you're connecting to or the IP address, well, you do that same thing here. So it's going to prompt you for the folder, and you're going to enter the IP address of your Drobo, and then slash backslash the folder name
Right.
that you're
And
trying to
and
connect to.
and there's a login if you need a login, which you probably shouldn't on your Drobo. But if you
But you
do,
might,
then
you might be
yeah.
prompted for a username and password, and you may very well be. In fact, I'd be certain you probably are going to be prompted for that, unless you have the Drobo set up for
Yeah.
anonymous file sharing. So you're very
Right. Right. Right.
likely going
Yeah.
to be prompted for an account name and password, possibly not. And then
Yeah.
you have to decide where you want to mount this network device to. So this is kind of important. What you're going to do is choose a folder. You're going to choose a folder on your Synology that the Drobo folder is going to be connected to or mounted to. So if you're reading the documentation, it's going to say mount. When you attach to a network device, you're mounting that network device to some location. And in the case of Synology, you're mounting it to a folder on the Synology NAS. So that would be a little bit of setup too. You want to perhaps pre-create a folder to which you're going to mount the Drobo to.
Right. Right.
And then you can choose if you want to mount it automatically at startup. I don't know that you necessarily need to do that. You may not want to do that, especially if this is a one-time thing. But in the event that you're in the copy process and something happens and you need to reboot your Synology or whatever, you may want to automatically mount at startup. But I would think you probably don't need to, quite frankly.
Yeah. No, I don't think so.
And then from there, going back to what we said about a USB connected Drobo, you'll see that mounted Drobo folder under remote folder. So in File Station, you'll see a remote folder, and that's where your Drobo data will reside.
It resides. Yeah.
And you just copy and paste, drag and drop, whatever you want to from that location to the other. And again, I still recommend, regardless of whether you're using File Station, regardless of whether you're using Mac OS Finder, regardless of whether you are connecting via USB or connecting via SMB, I still say do it in chunks. If you're going to copy and paste, do it in chunks. And just,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know how much error recovery File Station has for copying and pasting versus the Finder.
Right. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I wouldn't. Yeah. I haven't had any huge catastrophes with it, but yeah, I haven't. I don't think it's that robust either. So yeah, I definitely would. Yeah.
Having been burned by copy
Yeah.
paste slash drag and drop operations more times than I can count on both
Right.
Mac, Windows, well, actually, also
Yes.
Linux. All the times I've been burned by doing a copy paste and then having to backtrack and figuring out what didn't work and what did work. Oh my gosh. I say do it in chunks if you can. Now, there
Yeah.
are other
Yeah.
tools, there are other methods, there are other applications you can install on DSM on the Synology that might be a great way to go. You could use one of their backup applications, I would think would work fine as well. There are lots of tools available in the, well, for want of a better term, the App Store for the Synology that should work well for doing these kind of operations that would include more robust error correction in the event of a problem while you're copying files, or at least the
Right.
opportunity to go back and retry a copy operation, versus a drag and drop or copy paste. But this would be a great way to go. Just mount it as a remote folder within FileStation, and then copy and paste from one to the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that definitely works as good as anything for sure.
Yeah,
And it depends upon too how much data that you have to copy over, and
very true.
the size of the into each individual file and whatnot. But it may not you know uh, be as big of a deal as you think. It's I think a lot of my data that I copied over was almost done after I initially set everything up and I had been using it for a while. I think I copied it over sort of piecemeal, little by
Mm,
little. Now, when you're talking about your uh, so the client with their client photos and probably with several terabytes of data, that's going to take a little while.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
I probably almost would like to use the USB copy, but use something like you know uh, either the ChronoSync or Carbon Copy Cloner in a way that they kind of check up the data themselves, I think, and they're always plus they do a good job of verifying things have been copied, and if there's a problem, I mean, it it just handles things a lot better than trying to just copying things with the Finder. Now, the Finder, um, they the finders definitely come a little ways too. You can stop and resume copies and stuff like that with
Right,
the Finder,
right,
but it's still not the same as what it was
right, right. And
or
and you're
what it is with the yeah.
you're absolutely right. I mean, we talked about a lot of different methods that you can get data from an older storage device to a newer storage device, whatever those storage devices might be. As you mentioned, we talked about copy and paste. We talked about drag and drop. We talked about connecting directly to the NAS via USB and then using FileStation or the USB copy command. We talked about
Yeah.
connecting to an N version of a Drobo over the network, also via
Yep.
FileStation. By the way, you could do that on the Mac too. You don't have to use FileStation, I should mention. You can connect to the
Right.
Drobo as a network device, and you can connect to the Synology as a network device, and then use the Finder if you prefer. Or you could use Carbon Copy Cloner or ChronoSync that way
Exactly.
too. I feel as if all the methods that we mentioned, if it's available to you, using, as you said, I'm going to agree with you 100% here, using a tool like Carbon Copy Cloner or ChronoSync or SuperDuper is absolutely the best way to go
Right.
and the safest way
Yeah.
to go. Not only is it the best way to
Yeah.
go, the easiest to manage way to go, but it's also the
Yeah.
safest way to go.
Safest. And very well could be one of the faster ways to go too, actually. Yeah.
It could be. It could
Yeah.
be. Well, Eric, we had our essential apps episode in January,
Yeah.
and we kind of agreed. I think we agreed that we're going to try to do a new essential app every week. We had so many essential apps to talk about that
Yes.
we just couldn't cover them all in the essential apps episode. So we said we were going to alternate. And if you listen to last week's episode, I put Barry on the spot and made him pick an essential app, and he picked SetApp. Now,
Yes.
I warned you before recording that the ball was going to be in your court this time. So
Right.
I'm going to throw it over to you, Eric. What is
Okay.
your pick for an essential Mac app for this episode?
For this episode. And I will say, actually, Barry's pick was very good. Actually, I was thinking that, and actually I hadn't thought of that. I have set app myself, and um, it's something that I kind of held off getting for a long time because I thought, I don't need another subscription and everything. But then I got a deal on it, and even after I had gotten a deal on it, I wasn't using it because I was like, well, I don't want to get hooked on to using these apps. And I'm like, wait a minute, why do I have this? And it itself even has a number of apps that have their own subscriptions that you can get rid of, once you get set up and kind of combine it. So that was a terrific uh, essential app. And they do a
You
great
you
job of
can't
curating
pick
apps
set
too.
app. You can't pick set
No,
app,
I
Eric.
can't pick it. No, I'm not. So I will do the next best thing. I will pick an app that is available on Set App, and it's also available on its own too. And it's called Soulver or Soulver. I don't know. It's Soulver, and it markets itself as a notepad calculator. And so and it came out, I want to say, wow, maybe a long, how many, maybe 2009, 2010 ish, or it could have even been earlier than that. And it's a Mac only app. However, it is on iPad OS and iOS as well. And although as far as the iPhone version, he has not updated that in quite some time. I'm also not completely sure if you can still get that. I I don't know, but I do have it on my phone, and I do um, use it for that. Although I wish that he had updated it because the newer versions have so many more features. Anyway, it instead of using your traditional calculator, you can use this, and it it kind of has some simple markdown type things you can and other syntax. So but one of the things you can easily do is you can list things almost kind of like a spreadsheet. So if you have a bunch of different items that you want to tally up and say, I want to, keep track of this and this and this and this, it's really easy to do that. And it has a column on the right hand side that then has all the totals and then keeps a giant total at the bottom. But more than that, it it just has so many neat features. I mean, one of the things is unit conversions. For example, you can say 20 meters in feet or vice versa, and it'll give you that.
Nice.
And it has all kinds of units that you can't even imagine. And if it doesn't have it, you can create your own. I mean, you could say, you can add, like, let's see, what did I add? I think I added qubits. And you basically just take a reference unit, like millimeters. I think a qubit is like, I don't know, 413 millimeters. And so then you can forever use that. And, but it also you can have access to like Wolfram Alpha and do different questions. I mean, you can say the weather in Italy or the temp in Italy or the high or whatever. You can, um, it has all sorts of things with percentages. You can say, five is, a percentage of what to 100 or whatever. I mean, it's, you name it, it's in there. And it's got a lot of natural language um, functions as far as parsing natural language and being able to use it. But it's, it is hugely worth having and using. And you probably, once you start using it, you'll probably just not use your calculator again unless it's a real simple thing. But even then, and they also have a small little app. I'm not sure why you didn't kind of make it as a helper app for the main app, but there's something called Soulver Mini that you can bring up, and it's almost like a little spotlight or launch bar looking thing, and you have most of the functionality that you do in Soulver within Soulver Mini, and so you can start, just pounding away and working on problems or keeping track of stuff, and then you could just save it into a regular Solver document too. So, like I said, it is a Mac only app. I think there's some developers that have made similar Windows versions, but it's not something that this developer intends on doing. The one thing he did do, though, is created an open source version of the main engine or the main core of Solver, and it's called Solver Core. And it's
Wow.
actually available out on GitHub and other applications. In fact, I've seen it on the phone because when I was looking for a, a newer solver type app for the phone, I found other apps, and at least one of them uses this solver core. And so a lot of the things that you can do in solver, you can do in these other applications because he's made it available, which is, again, really slick as well. So I think the application's maybe $20, $30, I want to say, without there's no subscription. And I think the Solver Mini might be another 14 or $15. I mean, just completely worth it. I think the iPhone version, I'm not sure. Sometimes he has like, you can feed the developer, like donate money. It, if you have any need for this sort of thing, if you have to, punch in a bunch of different figures, even if it's just keeping track of bills or something like that for the month, it's just completely worth it. It's can't say enough good about it.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember you or somebody else mentioned Solver in a past Essential Apps episode a couple years ago. Probably was you.
Yeah,
And as you were describing it just now, I pulled up their site. Their site is Solver, Soulver dot app. Oh my
yeah,
gosh, I highly recommend anyone who's even thinking about Solver to click on the features tab because there are so many things that we didn't even touch upon just now.
I,
Things like
I know.
variables. You can
Yes, yes,
you can actually declare a variable using the equal sign. So in their example, monthly rent equals $1,250. Awesome.
yeah,
It's got SI notation. So things like 100K represent 100,000. It has
yes,
shortcuts integration. It has Alfred integration. It seems to integrate with Quick Look as well, if I'm reading this correctly.
yes. It
Uh,
does. Yep.
I mean, there's so much that this app can do, including exporting things like the sheets you create. You mentioned being able to do like a spreadsheet like layout of your numbers.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
it says you can export those in CSV, plain text, PDF, HTML, or as solver files. And the thing I like, they're all quick lookable. I like the word quick
yeah.
lookable.
They're all
They're
quick
all quick
clickable.
lookable.
Yeah,
I mean, there is
yeah.
so much that this app can do. I'm not even sure we could cover it in just talking about it as an essential app.
I
Um,
know.
Interestingly, and I wonder if you've been using this, it also says there's a command line tool too.
Yes, actually, I have not used the command line tool, but I did want to check it out, and probably because I use Solver Mini or Quick Solver. But yeah, the command line tool looks really neat as well. Um, and probably you could totally use that, especially if you want to do some automation. The command line tool would be terrific because I'm assuming you could shell script whatever you wanted. Um, and the other thing too, I mentioned weather. I think was trying to think. It also does stocks. They also have like additional places, like you can add places, and then you punch in the clothes. So if I click new place, this is in the preference in North America, it'll actually fill in the name for me. It'll say like Eric Land or Ericville, but then I can name it whatever. So let's say Lake Mills, it. So if I want to say the weather in Lake Mills or the time in Lake Mills, then it knows, okay, that's near Madison, Wisconsin. So then it will, I don't have to like try to teach it that. So it'll, it'll, and I think that's the additional places. But I mean, there's just so many little things that are just really neat about it that, um, yeah, I can't say enough about it. I think it's worth, and like you said, I did not even cover a third of, not even a quarter of probably what you could do with it. So,
And did you mention this? I think the one thing that wasn't really clear to me as you were describing it is that you can organize all this information. So it gives you the ability to not only create these sheets, but then to organize them so you can keep them for future reference. It's not like a
Yes.
calculator where you're doing the calculation and then it goes away.
And it's
You're
gone.
you're creating this stuff and you can keep it and you can organize it and you can reopen it and refer to it again in the future. And
Yes.
for those who like to use it, you can use Markdown in the headings. So
Yes.
that, I mean, that's great. And then as I'm scrolling through here, I'm trying to find pricing. Now, it seems as if perhaps selling this is not super important because there isn't a buy now thing up in the menu bar. But
Right.
I did find that there's a 30-day trial.
Which is
So
cool.
if this
Yeah.
sounds even remotely interesting, this isn't like one of those wimpy little 5-day trials or 2-day trials. This is a 30-day trial to see if it's something that you can integrate into your workflow. That's very
Yeah.
generous.
It is a very generous. It is very, very, and the pricing, it looks like they pretty much are just available through the app stores.
Ah,
So
okay, that's
the
why I couldn't
app
find
store
it.
for the iPad, it's 19.95. For the Mac version, it's 34.95. And then, of course, it also says that it's available on SetApp um, as well. So, but yeah, I have both the Mac and the iPad version, and I had those even before I had SetApp. But yeah, yeah, I know. It's kind of weird. It's funny that it's not just available off the site too, but maybe maybe the stores, the app stores are good enough for them.
Yeah, maybe. And yeah, that's why I couldn't find it because it's only on the App Store and those buttons are on the homepage of the site. So there you go.
Yeah. Yep.
And a nice way to tie it into Barry's pick, Eric, if you have
Yeah.
SetApp, or if even if you're trialing SetApp,
SetApp.
it's right there. It's free. It's
It's
part
right
of
there.
your SetApp
Yeah.
subscription. So there's no trial at all. You just download it and use it whenever you want. So very,
Whenever you
very
want to.
cool.
Yep.
Very cool. Great
Super cool.
pick. Great pick. All right. Well, then I think that's going to do it for this episode of For Mac Guys Only. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Remember, I do love to get your letters. So if you have any comments about the show, a tip to share a software or hardware problem with your Mac, be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments of this week's show notes found at formaceysonly.com. Or, of course, you can drop me a line, Mike at formaceysonly.com. And Eric, what is the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
Eric at formatguysonly.com. That's works as good as anything.
And also be sure to subscribe to the show's YouTube channel at youtube.com/FMEOTV. And you can click that little notification bell. And when you do, you can find out when we are going live. You can join the chat room and you can catch all the behind the scenes stuff that doesn't make the final cut of the show. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks to Eric for joining me this episode.
Always glad to be here.
Stay subscribed, and we'll talk to you next time.
Cue the music.
There you go.
Cue. Yep.
See you, everyone.